Want a fast family hauler? Well, follow the classic American recipe. Slap a V8 under the hood, do a bit of tweaking, add a bit of garnish, and voila! That's exactly what Dodge did with their new Durango SRT. They've thoroughly transformed this 6-passenger carriage into something you wouldn't mind taking onto a drag strip. With a starting price just above 70 grand, it's not exactly cheap, but is a bargain compared to other high-performing SUVs like the GLS 63 and Range Rover Sport SVR. With that 70 grand, Durango gets an updated wide-body front fascia and functional hood scoop. It looks like a Hellcat on stilts, to be honest. SR2 treatment also gets you a new exhaust system, limited slip diff, stiffer springs, anti-roll bar, adaptive dampers, 20-inch wheels, and even a 3.7 rear axle ratio. There are even 392 badges on the side fenders, which of course reflect the engine displacement in cubic inches. And that's where all that money went, into Dodge's 6.4-liter Hemi V8, pushing out 475 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque. Now, that's a lot of power, and Dodge actually calls this the most powerful three-row SUV around, which is not exactly true, is it? The folks at AMG make something called the GLS 63, which pushes out more power, but is a little bit slower from 0 to 100, so Dodge really should have called this the quickest three-row SUV around, not the most powerful. But regardless, that's a lot of power under this front hood. It's a cool-looking SUV. Is it any fun to drive, and is it just as usable and as comfortable as your standard Durango? Well, let's go for a spin and find out. 475 horsepower might seem like a lot, but you have to remember that the Durango SRT weighs a ton. It weighs more than a long wheelbase Range Rover, yet accelerates faster than a V6 Jaguar F-Type. That and its 8-speed transmission that the V8 is mated to is fairly quick when you leave it to its own devices. Shift for yourself via the paddles or the gear shifter here, and it can get quite clunky and jerky, but it's not just the speed that gets you in the SRT, it's the noise. The Durango SRT is loud and proud, which is a good and bad thing. The good, this is one of the best sounding SRTs by far. The supercharged variants and the Hellcats and Demons just don't really do it for me. This one has such a deeper, singular, focused note. You can add throttle even in 8th gear, and the whole car will sort of shake and resonate and boost you forward. It's such a nice, intoxicating noise that it's really hard to get tired of. The bad, well, it sounds like this all the time. You can't really turn off the noise unless you drive very, very lightly at 40 kilometers an hour. There's no exhaust button here, so you're constantly on it. Now, this makes you one of those neighbors, so when you start up the car in the middle of the morning, you get this loud bark followed by this V8 grumble. That, and every time you add gas or start up the car, the SRT noticeably shakes and it resonates, giving you this almost like thrumming feeling that's not the most pleasant thing to feel on a daily basis. It is very special on short bursts, you don't really mind it, but on a long road trip when you're constantly adding gas, you always feel that sort of thrumming throb. That being said, I think the best thing about the Durango SRT, aside from that engine, is the suspension tuning. It's so well balanced. Just with a click of a button, these adaptive dampers, you can switch it from very firm to very soft, and it just soaks up the road so well. It's not as firm as other high-performance SUVs like the Range Rover Sport SVR or BMW X5M. When in those soft dampers, it's so easy to drive this on a day-to-day basis. I would love to take this on a road trip. But on the flip side, when stiffened up, the Durango SRT, it really squats down, reduces body roll. It's actually a lot of fun to drive. You do get a lot of that top-heavy feel every time you turn, though, so it's not very sharp. What I love about the Durango SRT is how you can customize everything via these performance pages. You can customize transmission, stability control, how much power you want to send to the front and rear wheels, how stiff you want the suspension, and how stiff you want the steering. And it's not just firm or sport. You have 3 settings. You have street, track, drag even. Though I do wonder how many SRT owners really put their car into track mode. There is launch control, at least. They might use that. Have we talked about fuel economy yet? Probably because I don't want to. This thing's been a money pit this week. Spent more money on this than, well, just about anything else, even eating, even feeding myself. I'm averaging around 20.9 liters per 100. That's not good. And it's really hard to drive efficiently when you have a fire-breathing V8 under the hood. It's really hard to hold yourself back, really, when you want to hammer the throttle like that. Now, the Durango SRT is the closest thing you'll get to a minivan without actually being a minivan. That being said, it only seats 6 people, not 7 like the standard Durangos. That's because there's no middle bench offered in the back. A bit of a shame for those odd number of families out there. On the bright side, the third row space is exceptional. You can even opt to delete the third row at no extra charge. But don't expect top-notch interior quality here. You have to remember that this is a Dodge, not a Jeep. Plastics run rampant on all the high-traffic areas, which isn't always a bad thing. It screams functionality over luxury. I wouldn't mind spending a few hours in here, actually. And with all this modern tech like Apple CarPlay and a plethora of USB outlets, the Durango SRT is road trip ready. The steering wheel feels great. It's got these meaty grips with a shiny but plasticky bottom end. It's got so many buttons that you really never have to take your hand off the wheel. There are audio controls behind and paddle shifters slinking above. Seats are also really snug. But it sucks how a sunroof costs an extra $1,400. But without it, the cabin does feel a little dark and bunker-like. For those waiting for a Durango Hellcat, don't get your hopes up. I think the Jeep Grand Cherokee has that covered. But what I love about the Durango SRT is its multiple personalities. It's a ride in a straight line, but it's also well-mannered and calm when you want it to be. It's just as comfortable as your standard Durango, which is very rare in the high-performance SUV world. That being said, the noise, the constant thrumming V8, it's not for everyone, and the lack of a 7-seater capability is a bit of a shame. For those wanting that 2-in-1 compromise of a muscle car and a practical SUV, well, the Durango SRT offers just that. I'm Calvin Chan with Canadian Auto Review. Thanks for watching.